You awaken to the smell of scorched iron, the wind carrying ash as though it were snow, drifting endlessly across a land where nothing grows. Your boots sink into soil blackened with memories of fire, and beneath every step lies a bone, a helmet, a fragment of steel that once gleamed with defiance. The battlefield does not sleep, not even centuries later. It breathes with you. It sighs with you. It remembers with you. You are not walking through dust. You are walking through the marrow of a war that never ended. You close your eyes, and the air presses against your skin like the hand of something ancient, guiding you deeper. In that silence, you begin to hear the faint echo of drums, not of celebration, but of war. They grow louder with every breath, the rhythm pounding inside your chest until you cannot tell if it is your heart or the call of the Mandalorian crusade. You see their banners fluttering in winds that no longer exist. You see warriors encased in Beskar, their visors shining like unblinking stars, advancing with unshakable faith in their own strength. You do not watch from afar, you are there, inside the storm. The galaxy was unprepared for the Mandalorian wars. Worlds fell like brittle leaves into fire, and each conquest carried with it not merely death, but transformation. You remember standing at the edges of Republic space, watching smoke rise from cities that had been proud only days before. Their cries, their prayers, their fury, they braided together into a single chorus. And in that chorus, you found yourself searching for a voice, strong enough to answer. It was then, in the chaos of collapse, that REVAN rose. You feel the first time you heard his name, as if it were whispered into your own ear. REVAN, the one who would not wait. REVAN, the one who disobeyed the council when it chose silence over action. The council had looked upon the suffering and turned away, believing patience to be wisdom, believing non-intervention to be purity. But you, like REVAN, could not abide it. You saw children dragged from burning homes, and you felt the heat of those flames searing your conscience. And when REVAN spoke, his words were not merely words. They were fire itself. They were the command to stand, to fight, to end the cruelty with steel, if peace would not come with prayer. You march with him now. You remember the fleets gathering, Jedi abandoning their seats in the council to follow a voice that rang truer than tradition. You feel the weight of the mask he donned, a Mandalorian trophy, not of pride, but of defiance. That mask is heavy in your own hands as you lift it, its edges cold, its shape alien, yet it becomes your own face the moment it touches your skin. Through it, the galaxy no longer sees hesitation. It sees a leader born of necessity, a warrior who carries light into fire yet does not fear the shadow it casts. Every battle is etched into your bones as if you had lived it yourself. Onderon's skies burn red as the Mandalorian fleet descends, and your blade hums alive in your grip, a thin river of violet fire cutting against their iron. You hear the scream of starships breaking apart, smell the tang of ozone as lasers tear through the air. You are not simply a witness, you are REVAN's breath, his will, his vision. You feel his certainty that only through battle could the Republic be saved. Only through strength could the Mandalorians be broken. And yet, beneath that certainty lies something deeper, something more dangerous, the intoxication of power. Every victory feeds it, every conquest sharpens it. You feel it seeping into your veins like a second bloodstream. The Mandalorians fall, their warriors breaking, before tactics they had never imagined. Strategies that bent time and space, as though REVAN himself had already seen the outcome. You taste their defeat, but you also taste the hunger it leaves behind. A hunger that does not fade with victory. You walk now across the ruin of Cathar, where a world was silenced beneath Mandalorian boots. The sand still weeps with the blood of innocents, their bones littering the shore like pale seeds that never grew. Here, REVAN's fury was unchained. Here, the mask of justice and vengeance fused until no one could tell them apart. You kneel in the sand, and you hear it still, the screams of the Cathar echoing in the Force. Carried forward to this very moment, it was here that REVAN swore no more worlds would fall, no more innocents would perish unavenged. But in that oath, you sense the fracture forming, the thin crack that would widen into destiny. And so the war stretched on, years of fire that carved the galaxy in two. You remember the faces of those who followed him, Jedi who shed their robes for armor, who learned to kill as well as heal, who spoke of peace even as their hands dripped red. You hear their debates, their doubts, their faith in the one they called leader. Some saw him as savior. Others began to fear he was becoming something else, something greater and darker than a Jedi should ever be. Still, the Mandalorians pressed forward, and still, REVAN led you deeper into their heart. Battles blurred together into endless storms of fire and steel. Each victory demanded a sacrifice. Worlds burned, fleets shattered, lives extinguished, but through it all, REVAN's presence never faltered. His eyes shone with conviction, with purpose, and you could not help but believe. You followed because to turn back would mean surrender, and surrender was a language REVAN never spoke. And at last, the Mandalorian Wars brought you here, to the silent ruin where you now stand. This field, this graveyard of iron, is not just history, it is the culmination of choice. You stand among the remnants of a war that shaped not only REVAN, but yourself. Every scream, every blade, every decision lingers here, waiting to be remembered. The ash swirls again, settling on your shoulders like a cloak. You do not brush it away. It belongs to you now. You walk onward, deeper into memory, deeper into destiny, deeper into the silence where war and prophecy entwine. And as you vanish into the smoke of forgotten battles, you begin to feel it, the shadow of a truth not yet spoken, a future not yet revealed. This is not the end. It is only the threshold. You walk deeper into the ruins, the silence stretching into a vast cathedral of absence, as though the galaxy itself once held its breath here and never exhaled. The air grows heavy, thick with memory, and each inhalation pulls more than oxygen into your lungs. It pulls fragments of stories, half-forgotten cries, and the taste of blood turned to dust long ago. Your footsteps fall like whispers among giants, echoes chasing you as though the ground remembers the weight of armies. This is not simply soil. This is scripture, a holy text etched not in ink but in the shattered armor of the fallen. Each fracture, a verse, each corpse, a stanza. You begin to remember how REVAN turned these verses into prophecy, not by claiming divine revelation, but by embodying it. He was not merely a strategist, not merely a Jedi defying a council bound by its own fears. He became a mirror for the galaxy, reflecting its desperation, its rage, and its hope. You sense The way his presence bent those around him into orbit, as though his will alone generated gravity. He was more than a leader. He was inevitability made flesh, a storm in human form, a force that did not wait for permission. And you walked with him, willingly, because the alternative was paralysis, silence, the void of inaction. The Mandalorians had built their culture upon conquest, upon the certainty that strength justified all. They worshipped war as others worshipped gods, believing that only through conflict could worth be proven. But REVAN did not defeat them with strength alone. You feel the memory of his brilliance seeping into you, the way he unraveled their formations, the way he set traps so vast they seemed woven into the stars themselves. Fleets moved as if by instinct, soldiers anticipating a plan they did not even know they were enacting. For REVAN's mind was already 6 steps ahead, sculpting the battlefield like clay. And yet, as you recall this, you realize that what gave him power was not simply foresighted, was the terrifying clarity that he had embraced necessity. Even when that necessity bled into ruthlessness, you hear again the debates among the Jedi who followed. Some whispered in quiet corners, fearful that in saving the Republic, REVAN was destroying what it meant to be a Jedi. Others silenced their doubts with conviction, insisting that without him, the galaxy would already have been reduced to chains. You feel those arguments lingering in your chest, the way conviction can harden into stone, the way fear can curdle into prophecy. And somewhere in the middle of it all, you stand, unable to step away, unwilling to let go, because the momentum of destiny had already seized you, already swept you into its current dot. The war deepened. The Mandalorians became desperate, their defeats piling into a mountain of broken pride. You can still hear the growl of their language echoing in war councils, their voices refusing surrender, their resolve burning even as worlds slipped from their grasp. To them, defeat was not possible. To them, annihilation was preferable to submission. And so they fought harder, more ferociously, as though death itself were the only way to prove they had truly lived. You see it still in their eyes, behind the steel visors, a hunger not for victory, but for meaning. And REVAN gave them meaning, not the kind they sought, but the kind that obliterates illusions. His strategies forced them into traps they could not escape. Battles where their strength became weakness, courage became futility. You sense the way entire fleets shattered in his grasp, the way warriors who had never tasted fear began to falter. The Mandalorians had lived by the blade, but against REVAN, the blade became a chain, dragging them into the abyss. You walk across D-Zone now, the jungle moon where beasts as large as starships prowl beneath the canopy, where battles raged in tangled vines and swamps that swallowed men whole. The air here is thicker, greener, but it carries the same blood scent as every battlefield. You see the Mandalorians digging into the land, refusing to surrender ground, their banners defiant against the humid wind. And then you feel it, the surge of REVAN's tactics, not through brute force, but through precision. He turned the very jungle into his ally, bending nature into weaponry, leaving the Mandalorians crushed not only by Jedi blades, but by the living planet itself. But you also sense the danger coiling tighter with every victory. Each triumph deepened REVAN's belief that the path of conquest was the path of survival. The Jedi Code had always spoken of restraint, of harmony, of balance, But you feel how those words grew hollow in the roar of war when faced with annihilation. Balance seemed like cowardice, restraint like complicity. You feel that conflict inside you even now, the way your spirit leans toward his fire, the way it resists the cold silence of the council. And in that tension, you begin to understand. Wars do not only scar worlds, they scar souls. Malachor V approaches, though you do not yet step into its shadow. You only feel its pull, distant but inevitable, a black star on the horizon. The choices made here in these endless campaigns are the footsteps leading to that abyss. You remember the commanders who followed REVAN, each bound by loyalty, each reshaped by proximity to his will. Some were hardened into steel, others broke under the weight of it. You feel the way loyalty becomes both a blessing and a curse, the way it blinds and empowers in equal measure. The Mandalorian Wars were not only a crucible for the Republic, they were the forge that tempered REVAN into something more than a Jedi, more than a warrior. You feel the heat of that forge inside yourself now, burning through your veins, reshaping your understanding of what it means to fight, to lead, to sacrifice. The REVAN you follow is not yet Darth, not yet Shadow, but already the seeds are sown, buried beneath every victory, watered with every death. You know this, though you do not yet admit it. The mask hides not only his face, but the truth sprouting beneath it. And as you walk through the endless graves, as you breathe the silence of worlds that bled themselves dry, you realize something else. Victory has a cost that no one escapes. The Mandalorians paid with their lives, their pride, their civilization shattered into fragments scattered across the stars. But the Jedi, too, paid with their innocence, their clarity, their bond to a code that no longer fit the galaxy they fought to protect. And REVAN paid most of all, though he did not yet know it, though you did not yet see it. The cost was waiting, hidden in the shadows of Malachor, whispering for the day it would claim its due. You stand still now, the battlefield stretching around you like a frozen sea of ash and bone. The silence feels heavier than before, as though the ghosts have settled into you, as though you have become the vessel for their stories. You inhale once more, and the ash tastes of iron and sorrow, and you know this is not the end of the memory. This is not the end of the war. It is only the deepening, the descent, the path narrowing toward a single, inescapable moment where everything will collapse into shadow. And you walk forward, willingly, into that narrowing path, because there is no other direction left. You descend further into the silence, and it no longer feels like silence. At all it feels like the hum of something vast, buried beneath time, pressing itself against your skin. The battlefield has transformed into a threshold, and with every step you cross deeper into its memory, as though the ground itself has chosen to reveal its secrets to you. The air tastes of smoke and rust, and it clings to your tongue until you cannot separate breath from remembrance. You are not only walking through history, you are becoming history. Your body another vessel carved into the endless hymn of war and consequence. You begin to feel the weight of what it means to have followed REVAN, not as a distant story told in cantinas, but as a living truth woven into your marrow. You were there when the Republic learned that salvation was not gentle, that peace was not a gift, but a conquest. You can still see the faces of the civilians whose worlds became collateral, whose lives were traded for victory. Their eyes haunt you, not because you wished for their suffering, but because you justified it. You whispered to yourself that such pain was necessary, that the galaxy itself demanded it. And through that justification, you realize you too became part of the shadow that had already begun to bloom within REVAN's heart. You walk into the final great confrontation of the Mandalorian Wars, and the echoes become louder. You can hear the shatter of starships like glass, the roar of the mass shadow generator's conception whispered into the ears of generals who no longer knew how to stop. Malachor V is not yet beneath your feet, but it breathes in your bones, a storm waiting for its release. You recall the council meetings of war, the endless arguments about how to end what had begun, and in all of them, REVAN's voice was the one that cut deepest. He spoke with the certainty of one who no longer asked for permission, only obedience. His words were fire and gravity all at once, and when he declared the path forward, you knew you could not resist. The Mandalorians gathered their last strength, their fleets massed in a defiance that seemed eternal. They had lost worlds, leaders, and pride, but they had not lost their belief that battle was the purest form of existence. And so they threw themselves into Malachor, into the abyss, determined to prove their worth, even if it meant annihilation. You stand among them for a moment, not as enemy, but as witness, and you feel the terrible nobility of their cause. To fight until there was nothing left, that was their truth. And REVAN answered them with a truth of his own, that even nobility could be broken, that even faith could be shattered when it faced the will of one who had already embraced the necessity of victory at any cost. You feel the day of Malachor, not as memory, but as sensation, the shudder of gravity twisting upon itself, the scream of the mass shadow generator tearing ships and souls apart in silence too vast for comprehension. You feel the very planet wound itself into scar, its crust cracking beneath forces no world should endure. The Mandalorians died, not in battle, but in collapse, swallowed whole by an invention born of desperation and brilliance. And as you stand in the shadow of that devastation, you realize the truth that cannot be unlearned. The war did not simply end. Here it was transfigured. It became something else, something darker, something that would outlive both victor and vanquished. You search for REVAN in the aftermath, and you find him standing among the ruins, his mask flecked with ash, his eyes unreadable behind its alien gaze. Around him, the galaxy seemed to shrink, as though even the stars bent to the gravity of his choices. He had won. He had saved the Republic. He had destroyed the Mandalorians. And yet, you feel it as he does. Victory tastes of ash. It clings to the tongue, bitter and unyielding, reminding you that salvation is never clean, that triumph often carries within it the seed of undoing. You see the survivors, both Jedi and soldiers, walking away from Malachor with hollow eyes. They carry their victories as burdens, their triumphs as scars. Some whisper prayers to the Force, others refuse to speak at all. But all of them are changed, and you know you are changed as well. You cannot leave this battlefield behind, because it has already followed you inward, carved itself into the chambers of your heart. You turn toward REVAN one final time, and you understand what the Council had feared, though they could not see it with clarity. REVAN has crossed a threshold that no Jedi should cross. He has tasted what it means to command destiny itself, to bend not only armies but worlds into obedience. He has seen the weakness of restraint, the futility of silence, and he has chosen the fire instead. And though you feel the danger in that choice, though you sense the abyss waiting with patient hunger, you also know that you cannot turn away. You too are bound to his shadow. The ashes of Malachor cling to you as you walk onward. They whisper of victories that poison, of choices that bind, of destinies that cannot be undone. You do not brush them from your skin. You accept them because they are now part of you, and as you leave behind the grave of the Mandalorian Wars, you understand that you are not leaving anything behind at all. You are carrying it with you, every scream, every silence, every broken vow. The war is over, but the shadow it cast stretches forward, long and unbroken, into futures you cannot yet see. And in that forward path, you begin to sense the truth that waits, that this was never merely a war between Mandalorians and the Republic, never merely a clash of fleets and armies. This was the awakening of a will that would shape centuries, a legacy that would ripple through empires, through galaxies, through the very heart of the Force. You do not need to see the future to feel it. You already know, and so you close your eyes one last time upon the battlefield, and the silence folds around you, heavy yet tender, as though it cradles you into another dream. This is the end of the first revelation. This is the beginning of the shadow yet to come. You drift beyond the edge of known stars. The light of familiar constellations fades behind you, swallowed by a vastness that feels alive, as though the darkness itself were breathing, watching, waiting. The hum is only a fragile shield against the silence pressing from all sides. Here, the stars are not guides. They are warnings, distant sparks, trembling on the edge of a sea that does not welcome intruders. You walk into that sea, and it swallows you. The air tastes different, colder, carrying with it the metallic temps of inevitability. You sense currents invisible to the eye, currents of the Force itself, pulling you deeper, drawing you toward a gravity that is not of planets, but of destiny. Every step feels heavier, as though unseen hands press upon your shoulders, urging you forward, whispering without sound. You know you should resist, but resistance here feels like trying to resist the tide of a black ocean. You move because you must, because the darkness already knows your name. You remember REVAN's hunger in this moment, not for conquest. The Mandalorian Wars had been fire, and from that fire he had emerged, not quenched, but sharpened. He sought something greater, something beyond the squabbles of fleets and armies. He sought the source, the origin, the hand behind the shadows that had always pulled at the edges of the galaxy. And in his search, you followed, compelled not only by loyalty, but by the same gnawing emptiness that drove him forward. The Council had offered silence, the Republic had offered politics, but the unknown promised truth. You walk deeper, and you find that truth is not gentle. You feel it before you see it, a coldness that slides beneath your skin, threading into your veins, coiling around your heart. And it begins. The ship drifts toward a world you do not recognize, a world that seems to shimmer with wrongness, its surface dark and radiant at once, as if it were both stone and flame. You feel the pull of it, not from gravity, but from will, a will vast enough to eclipse suns. And then you hear it, the whisper, not in words, not in language, but in sensation. It coils through your mind like smoke, threading through memories, unraveling your certainties. It does not command, it does not ask, it simply exists. And in its existence, you feel yourself bending, tilting, reshaping. The eternal Sith Empire does not need to scream its truths. It breathes them into you, subtle and inexorable, until you cannot distinguish their thoughts from your own. You step onto the soil of Drummond Cause, and the very air feels like a wound. The sky churns with storms that never end, lightning clawing across the heavens as though the planet itself rages at existence. The ground is damp, heavy with decay, yet beneath the rot pulses a rhythm, a heartbeat older than the Republic, older than the Jedi. You taste it in the rain. You feel it in the stone, the presence of an empire hidden yet eternal, waiting in silence for the day it would rise again. When his presence pressed upon you, it was not like meeting a being, but like encountering the raw essence of the void itself. You could not look at him without feeling your soul tilt, could not hear his voice without sensing something inside you unravel. He did not threaten, he did not need to. His existence was enough to declare dominion. You recall how REVAN stood before that presence, and though his body trembled, his spirit did not. He stared into the abyss, and instead of breaking, he learned, he listened, he absorbed, and in that listening, you felt the fracture open within him. Such vastness, and yet, within that temptation, you also felt something awaken, the knowledge that even eternity could be challenged. The whispers became louder. They did not merely echo, they embedded. They spoke of empires that had risen and fallen long before. Your Republic of Wars fought not for planets, but for the very nature of existence. They revealed that the Jedi and Sith you knew were but pale reflections of something older, something purer, something far more terrifying. They told you that the Force itself was not balance, but battlefield, a current of endless struggle, and that those who hesitated would drown. You listened, even when you tried not to, because the truth does not require permission to be heard. And so you changed. REVAN changed. Enemies, but against the Emperor's suffocating will, blurred into nothing. You recall the strange comfort of that blurring, how it felt to surrender the burden of decision, to allow a will greater than yours to guide. And you shiver, because even now you cannot say if you resisted or embraced it. The Empire of Shadows was not idle. Its agents moved unseen, its armies trained in silence, its designs stretched across centuries, and you walked among them, not as conqueror but as student, as captive, as something in between. You learned their secrets, the rituals that twisted the Force, the words that bound spirits to eternity, the ways in which hunger could masquerade as destiny. Each lesson cut deeper into you until the Jedi you had been felt like a dream half forgotten. You still carried the lightsaber, but in your hands it no longer felt like the same weapon. It felt heavier, darker, as though it had absorbed the storms of Drummond Cause, and through it all, you could feel REVAN's resolve tightening, hardening into something unbreakable. He did not bow, he did not surrender, but neither did he remain untouched. He became something new, something forged, not only in war, but in whispers. You feel his duality pressing into your own chest, the way light and darkness began to braid together, inseparable. He had fought the Mandalorians with the fire of justice, but now he carried within him the cold flame of eternity. And you, bound to his path, carried it too. The storms of Drummond cause rage endlessly above you. Yet they feel less like weather and more like reflection, the sky itself mirroring the turbulence within. You lift your face to the rain, and it runs down your skin like tears you did not know you carried. Shaped by the Council, no longer shaped by the Republic, no longer shaped even by REVAN alone. It is shaped by a shadow greater than all of them, a shadow that now resides within you. And as you walk away from that first meeting with the eternal Sith Emperor, you understand that nothing will ever be the same. You are fractured, but in that fracture you glimpse a strange wholeness, a terrible clarity. They will guide you, haunt you, shape you, until the day you, too, become part of the endless storm. You remain beneath the storm-split skies of Drummond cause, though time itself has lost its meaning. Days cannot be measured where the sun never shines, where lightning claws endlessly at the horizon, where rain falls without end, as though the heavens themselves bleed sorrow into the soil. You walk through jungles thick with shadows, where each tree hums with a resonance that feels older than life, and every stone seems to pulse with memory. And in its knowing, you feel the weight of something vast pressing ever deeper into your bones. You remember the chambers where the Emperor's servants gathered, dark halls lit by fire and by fear, where whispers carried more power than shouts. You stand again in those chambers, cloaked figures moving like shadows given flesh. The air grows colder in their presence, not because of temperature, but because of hunger, an endless hunger that saturates everything here. And in that cold, you hear the Emperor without hearing him, his will pressing through their mouths, their gestures, their very silence. REVAN stood at the center of it all, unbowed yet marked. You can still see his mask glinting in the torchlight, a reflection that seemed less like steel and more like a veil drawn over eternity. You recall how he listened to every whisper, how he bent each fragment of forbidden knowledge into a weapon of thought. You could feel him shifting, not with sudden violence, but with the subtle inevitability of seasons changing. He was no longer simply the Jedi who defied the Council, no longer only the warrior who broke the Mandalorians. He was becoming something else, something both greater and more terrible, forged in a crucible of silence and shadow. And you felt it too. You learned rituals that stretched beyond the limits of the Jedi, words that pulled at the threads of the Force in ways you had never imagined. You remember standing in a circle etched with runes, the stone beneath your feet humming with power as red light spiraled upward, wrapping around your body like a serpent. The energy burned, yet you did not step away. Instead, you opened yourself to it, and in that opening you realized how thin the line had always been between healing and destruction, between light and shadow. You understood why the Sith did not fear the dark, and part of you, despite the terror, envied their certainty. You recall how the Emperor's will reached into you during those moments, threading through your veins like black fire. He did not shout, he did not rage, he only whispered, and the whisper was enough to shift the foundation of your being. You cannot remember the exact words, because they were not words at all. They were impressions, visions, sensations, a promise that eternity could be yours, that mortality was a chain, that the Force was not balance but dominion. And as those impressions wrapped around your spirit, you realized that resistance was no longer simple. To resist meant tearing part of yourself away, and to yield meant embracing something that felt both liberating and annihilating. REVAN resisted, yet he also yielded. You felt it in him as you felt it in yourself. His mind was sharp enough to cut through illusion, but sharpness does not prevent the blade from bleeding when it slices too deep. The Emperor seeped into him not by conquest, but by reflection, showing him visions of futures where the Republic fell, where the Jedi Order crumbled, where only strength preserved meaning. And REVAN, who had already seen the futility of silence and restraint, could not ignore those visions. He absorbed them, repurposed them, transformed them into strategy. But no matter how much he reshaped them, their origin remained the same: whispers carried from the abyss. You walk through the ancient archives hidden deep within the planet's surface, vaults carved into stone long before the Republic was born. You run your hands across tablets etched with languages you cannot fully understand, yet the Force breathes meaning into them. They speak of empires stretching back into forgotten millennia, of wars fought on scales the galaxy no longer remembers, of rulers who consumed entire worlds. You realize the truth. The Sith are not merely an order. They are a memory older than the stars you once thought eternal. And now that memory is awake again, alive in the shadow of the Emperor. But with knowledge comes fracture. The more you learn, the more you feel yourself split. You hear the Council's voice, still, faint, and distant, urging balance, urging discipline, urging the way of the Jedi. And yet, those voices feel pale against the thunder of the storms that surround you. Now you close your eyes, and you see the Jedi Code not as scripture, but as cage. And then you see the Sith code freedom through passion, strength through struggle, and you feel its weight pressing against your chest, like both temptation and truth. You know that neither code can contain you any longer, because you have tasted something greater. The possibility that you are more than either. REVAN begins to speak differently in those days. You recall his voice in the dim light of Cause's storms, speaking not only of survival, but of destiny. He spoke of how the Republic was fragile, how the Jedi were blind, how the galaxy was vulnerable to shadows that stretched beyond comprehension. His words no longer felt like defiance alone. They felt like prophecy, heavy with the inevitability of what was to come. And you, standing beside him, could not tell whether he was still resisting the Emperor or already becoming his instrument. Perhaps both. Perhaps there was no difference anymore. The Emperor's will deepened its grip. You felt it in the subtle ways, how your dreams began to fill with voices not your own, how your thoughts sometimes drifted into patterns that did not belong to you, how the very air seemed to pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat, and yet you did not feel enslaved. You felt expanded, stretched, opened to possibilities you had never known. It terrified you even as it exhilarated you. For the first time, you wondered if freedom itself might be a lie, that perhaps everyone is bound, not by chains of metal, but by whispers of destiny too vast to escape. You look now at the storms raging above, and you realize they are mirrors of your own soul, chaotic, unending, beautiful in their terror. You are not the same being who first set foot on this world. The unknown regions have already reshaped you, whether you admit it or not. You walk with REVAN still, But you know that you are no longer merely following him. You are walking into a future neither of you can fully see, a future shaped not by choice alone, but by the shadows that already live within you. And as you leave the halls of the Emperor, as you step once more into the rain that never ends, you feel the fracture within you widen. You know you cannot return unchanged. You know the galaxy that awaits you beyond these storms will no longer recognize the one who departed it. And as the thunder rolls like the voice of eternity itself, you accept the truth you cannot flee. The shadow of the Sith Empire has already claimed you, and its whispers will echo inside you for as long as you exist. You walk deeper into the labyrinth of storms, and though the planet never changes, you feel yourself changing with every step. The thunder does not simply roll across the heavens, it speaks. The lightning does not merely tear through clouds, it reveals. Each strike burns visions across your mind, images of futures that may come to pass, reflections of choices not yet made. You see REVAN standing in the center of it all, his mask gleaming like a beacon and a shroud at once. And you realize that the mask is not only his, is yours. For what is a mask, if not the silence you wear when words cannot contain the truth of who you are becoming? The whispers coil tighter now, no longer faint, no longer subtle. They weave themselves into your thoughts with such delicacy that you can no longer tell if you are remembering or imagining, resisting or surrendering. The Emperor's will flows into you like water through cracked stone, filling every fracture, every hidden space. And though you know this is intrusion, you also feel it as revelation. It does not strip away your identity, it expands it, stretching your boundaries until you feel as though your spirit is no longer confined to flesh, but spread across the storm itself. You are both prisoner and God, bound and infinite, and in that paradox, you sense the truth of what it means to be touched by the eternal Sith Empire. REVAN feels it too. You see the way he carries himself now, the way silence drapes around him, not as emptiness but as gravity. He no longer needs to speak often, for when he does, every word feels inevitable, carved into stone before it leaves his lips. His eyes, hidden behind the mask, are not empty, they are burning, not with the fire of rage, but with something colder, sharper, a flame that does not consume but cuts. You realize then that REVAN is no longer walking the path of Jedi or Sith alone. He is walking the path of synthesis, of something new, something the galaxy has not yet named, and you, bound to him by fate, feel yourself walking it as well. You recall the night you dreamt of the galaxy collapsing into silence, of stars winking out one by one until only a void remained. And in that void, a single voice spoke, not with malice, not with love, but with certainty. The voice said only this: all things serve the endless hunger. You awoke, drenched in rain, your chest heaving, your spirit trembling, and yet, even as terror gripped you, part of you longed to hear the voice again. You cannot forget it, because you know it was not a dream. It was the Emperor, reaching through time and silence, stitching his presence into the fabric of your being. And yet, even as the darkness deepens, you feel the thread of resistance burning quietly within you. It is not defiance born of arrogance, but of clarity. You know now that surrender would mean losing everything that once defined you, and so you resist not by rejecting the whispers, but by shaping them. You let them flow through you, but you do not let them claim you. You bend them, twist them, turn them into tools. You realize this is what REVAN has been doing all along. He does not resist the Emperor by silence. He resists by adaptation. He allows the darkness in, but he weaves it into armor, into strategy, into a weapon forged of shadow itself. The unknown regions no longer feel like exile. They feel like crucible. Every storm that lashes against you is another hammer striking against the steel of your soul. Every whisper is another fold pressed into the blade of your spirit. You are no longer the same being who entered this place, and you never will be again. You know this with certainty, and the knowledge is both sorrow and liberation. For though the Republic may never understand, though the Jedi may condemn, though even your own heart may tremble at what you are becoming, you feel the truth resonate. You have been remade. You see the Empire in its silence, vast and waiting. Fleets hidden among the storms, soldiers trained in shadows, knowledge stored in vaults older than your order. You realize the galaxy does not know how fragile it is, how close it stands to an abyss it cannot yet see. And you know, as REVAN knows, that when the time comes, the Republic will not be ready. The Jedi will not be ready. Only those who have walked through this storm, who have heard the whispers and survived them, will have the strength to shape what follows. The rain continues to fall unending, unbroken, and you let it wash over you. It tastes no longer of sorrow alone, but of transformation. You are drenched not only in water, but in revelation, and you carry it now like a second skin. You walk away from the Emperor's shadow, yet you know the shadow walks with you. It will never leave. It will linger in every breath, every choice, every silence. It is not a chain, not yet, but it is a weight, and it will remain until the end. And as you step back toward the stars, leaving Dramond Cause behind, but never escaping it, you feel the path narrowing once again. The unknown regions have taken you, broken you, remade you. What remains now is not merely a warrior, not merely a Jedi, not merely a servant of destiny. What remains is a figure balanced on the edge of shadow and light, carrying within you both the hunger of the abyss and the fragile memory of the dawn. You look once more at the endless storm, and you whisper into its silence, not with fear, but with recognition. For you understand at last that the storm is not outside you, it is you, and it will carry you forward into a galaxy unprepared for what you are becoming. You hold the mask in your hands, and it is heavier than steel should be. Its edges bite into your palms as though it resents being touched, as though it remembers every life lost beneath its gaze. You lift it slowly, and the air shifts around you, thickening with echoes of war and whispers of betrayal. You see your reflection in its surface, distorted, fragmented, a face that no longer belongs to you. And when, at last, you press it against your skin, you realize the mask does not cover you, it becomes you. The world does not see your eyes anymore. It sees the weight of history staring back. You remember when it was first taken from the fallen Mandalorian, a trophy seized in defiance, transformed into a symbol greater than conquest. It was not worn for vanity, nor for protection. It was worn for memory, for every life lost, for every vow made, for every silence the Jedi Council could not break. The mask became the face of the one who chose to act when others turned away. You feel it sealing itself to your spirit now, whispering that identity is not chosen but forged, not gifted but demanded. With the mask, you are no longer individual. You are myth. You are movement. You are inevitability. And then there is the blade. Its crimson glow hums against your skin like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. The first time you ignited it, the light was almost blinding, painting your face in blood and fire. You had once sworn to wield the saber as guardian, as defender, as instrument of peace. But when the blade bled red for the first time, you felt the truth. Peace had become illusion. This blade did not hum with serenity, it roared with judgment. It was not a weapon of defense, but of decision, a line drawn through the galaxy itself, separating those who would endure from those who would perish. The mask and the blade together, they are not tools, they are mirrors. They reveal what you have become, even when you cannot admit it to yourself. You recall the faces of those who looked upon you wearing them, how their expressions shifted. Some saw savior, others saw monster, but all saw something greater than the flesh beneath. You realize now that this is what true symbols do. They erase the individual, replacing it with legend. And once legend has taken root, there is no returning to anonymity. You walk through the corridors of starships, the mask pressed against your face, the blade ignited in your hand, and you feel the silence they bring. Soldiers straighten when you pass, their fear indistinguishable from reverence. Enemies hesitate, their courage cracking beneath the weight of what they think you are. Even allies speak to you differently, their words cautious, their tones reverent, as though the person they once knew has been swallowed by the figure standing before them. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps you have already been consumed. The mask remembers more than battles. It remembers the Emperor's whispers, the nights beneath Dremond causes storms, the visions of eternity unraveling before your eyes. It clings to those memories, feeding them back into you until you cannot separate past from present. You feel the way its metal seems alive, pulsing faintly in rhythm with your heart, as though the mask itself is an organ grafted to your spirit. You cannot take it off without feeling incomplete, without feeling as though part of your very being has been stripped away. And the blade, how many have fallen beneath it? You try to count, but numbers lose meaning in the tide of crimson. Each swing carved more than flesh. It carved destinies. It ended bloodlines. It silenced futures that would never come. You tell yourself it was necessary, that the galaxy demanded it, that survival left no other choice. And yet, even as you believe this, you feel the weight of their absence pressing into you, filling the silence between each heartbeat. The blade glows bright, but its glow is not light, it is shadow made visible, a reminder that salvation and damnation are never separate, but bound together in the same act. You remember the day you looked at yourself in a reflection of shattered glass, the mask covering your face, the blade burning in your hand, and you realized you could no longer see the Jedi who once stood there. You could no longer see the child who once believed in peace, who once dreamed of harmony, who once thought the galaxy could be healed without blood. All that remained was the mask and the blade, the twin symbols that had remade you. And for a moment, you wondered, were you still yourself, or had you become only the legend others whispered about? The answer never came. Instead, The war demanded you act again and again until the question itself became irrelevant. You could not put down the blade because the galaxy would not let you. You could not remove the mask because without it, you were no longer who they needed you to be. You were prisoner and prophet both, trapped by the very symbols that gave you power. And yet, even in that prison, you felt strength, you felt clarity, you felt purpose greater than anything you had known. Before, the mask is broken now, cracked across its surface, a fracture running through its core. You trace that fracture with your fingertips, and it feels like your own scar, carved into you by choices you cannot undo. The blade hums beside you, its glow steady, as though mocking the fragility of the mask. Together, they remind you that salvation is never pure, that every act of deliverance carries with it the taste of damnation. You understand now that you cannot separate them, just as you cannot separate light from darkness within yourself. They are bound, and so are you. You stand once more in silence, the mask heavy upon your face, the blade glowing like a wound in the night, and you know with certainty that aches through every bone that these symbols are no longer separate from you. They are you. The mask is your face, the blade is your hand, and together they are your destiny. Salvation and damnation bound as one, forever inseparable, forever yours. You carry the mask with you through corridors of memory, and it no longer feels like an object. It feels like a second soul clinging to you, whispering through its silent cracks. The fracture along its surface mirrors the fracture within your spirit, each line of broken steel reflecting the divisions that no meditation can heal. When you place it upon your face, the world alters. The air feels denser, colors sharper, voices more distant. You are not simply wearing metal, you are stepping into a different self. One carved by war and silence, one that does not question, one that does not yield. The mask shields you from doubt, but it also shields others from truth. For they will never again look upon your eyes and see the fragile being beneath, and the blade, crimson and merciless, becomes the companion to that mask. Its hum is constant, a song that reverberates in your bones, reminding you that power is not passive but alive, always hungering, always calling. You ignite it, and the air quivers, shadows retreating as though the light is not illumination but devouring flame. You recall the way enemies faltered at the sight of it, how even seasoned warriors who had faced death without hesitation hesitated when its glow painted their armor red. It was not the blade itself that frightened them, but what it represented. The truth that mercy had been abandoned, that this strike would not be tempered by restraint. You remember standing in the wreckage of worlds, the mask hiding your face, the blade still burning in your hand, and feeling the silence afterward. Silence more profound than any battlefield roar, silence that weighed heavier than screams. You told yourself it was necessary, that this devastation would prevent worse to come, that each cut of the blade was a stitch in the fabric of survival. And yet, in that silence, you also heard the faint cry of something else, the part of yourself that wondered if necessity had become excuse, if salvation had already drowned in the flood of damnation you carried forward. Still, you could not let go. The mask gave you resolve when your spirit wavered. The blade gave you clarity when the galaxy descended into chaos. Together, they made you more than flesh. They made you symbol, and symbols cannot retreat. symbols cannot hesitate. You bore their weight because you had no other choice. To remove the mask, to lay down the blade, would mean unraveling everything you had built. Every army that followed, every oath sworn in your name. You had become more than person, you had become the fire others gathered around. Even if that fire consumed all it touched, the mask grew colder over time. You noticed how, when you pressed it to your skin, it no longer felt like steel alone, but like stone, as though it carried the weight of tombs. Its cracks deepened, yet it did not break apart. Instead, it seemed to fuse more deeply into you, its fractures echoing your own. You could not tell whether you were wearing it or whether it was wearing you. And the blade's glow sharpened, its hum deepened, as if feeding upon every battle, every life extinguished, every choice that bent the galaxy closer to shadow. The saber became more than a weapon. It became a record, each vibration carrying echoes of the fallen. You recall when allies began to question the mask, to fear the blade. They whispered in corners, their eyes shifting when you passed, no longer certain if they followed a savior or a tyrant. And though their doubts stung, you understood why. They could not see the fractures beneath the steel. They could not feel the weight that pressed upon you. To them, you were unyielding, inexorable beyond question. And so you bore their fear, as you bore their loyalty, for both were chains of the same length. The crimson light filled not only battlefields, but your dreams. You closed your eyes and saw its glow painted across the endless void, cutting through stars, carving through time. And always, beside that glow, the mask hovered, watching, waiting, pressing against your face, until you no longer knew if you were dreaming or remembering. You could not escape them, even in sleep. They followed you, not as objects, but as truths, as symbols bound to your being. And slowly, you began to realize that they were no longer merely tools you carried. They were your fate, bound to you as surely as flesh to bone. You walk now into the quiet aftermath of another war-torn world, and as you gaze across the ruin, the mask tightens against your face. You feel the blade humming in your palm, its light flickering against the broken stones, and you know this moment has repeated across lifetimes. Salvation and damnation blur until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Perhaps they were never separate at all. Perhaps every act of salvation is also an act of destruction, and every act of destruction carries within it the seed of salvation. The mask and the blade do not argue this, they only remind you, and so you continue. The mask heavy, the blade burning, their presence inseparable from your own. You understand now that you will never lay them down, never walk without their shadow. For they are not simply objects, they are the shape of your destiny, carved into you forever, symbols that will outlast even your own name. You walk forward because you must, because the path behind has already been consumed, and because the mask and the blade will never let you stand still. You lift your face to the silent stars, the crimson glow still painting your skin, and you know this truth. You are no longer walking toward salvation or damnation. You are walking toward both, and they are the same. You move deeper into the current of memory, and the mask presses tighter against your face, as though it no longer wishes to be removed. It clings not as steel, but as skin, sealing itself into the lines of your spirit until you cannot recall how the world once looked through unburdened eyes. The crimson blade hums at your side, steady as a second heart, pulsing with its own rhythm, its own hunger. Together they guide you, not with words, but with presence. You are led by their silence, carried forward by their weight, drawn always toward battles that seem less like choices and more like inevitabilities. You stand among allies who once called you friend, and now they watch you with unease. Their eyes search for the Jedi they once knew, but all they find is the mask, unyielding and cold. They hear the hum of the saber before they see its glow, and even before it ignites, they feel the air tremble with what it means. You want to speak to them, to remind them of who you were, to remind them that you still bleed, that you still doubt, that you still dream, but the mask answers for you. The mask gives them silence, and silence can be more frightening than any word. You recall moments when the blade lit not against enemies, but in warning against those closest to you. It was never struck down in betrayal, yet its presence shifted the air, heavy with the unspoken. They knew that your vision had grown beyond theirs, that the path you walked was one they could not follow. Some called it destiny, others corruption, but all felt the distance it created. And though you longed for closeness, the mask denied it, the blade forbade it. You were not meant to be understood. You were meant to be seen, to be feared, to be followed. The cracks in the mask deepened, each fracture a record of a battle survived, a decision made, a soul silenced. You traced them with your fingers, sometimes in secret, as though touching them might let you feel the person you once were. But the fractures never revealed that person. They only revealed how far you had gone. You realized then that the mask was not breaking, it was you breaking, and the mask was simply showing you the shape of that break. And still, you wore it, because without it, you feared there was nothing left beneath. The blade carried its own memory. Each time you ignited it, you heard the faint echoes of those it had slain, not as screams, but as whispers. Fading voices carried on the current of the Force. They did not curse you, nor did they forgive you. They lingered only as reminders that every stroke of the blade carved the galaxy itself into a different shape. The weapon no longer felt like yours alone. It was history itself given form, a record of choices that could never be undone. You carried it, not because you desired it, but because to set it down would mean abandoning the very truth of who you had become. You wonder, in quiet moments when no one sees, if salvation was ever truly possible. You tell yourself that the mask was worn for justice, that the blade was wielded for survival, that all of it was necessary. And yet, in the silence between battles, when the galaxy itself seems to hold its breath, you feel the doubt stirring. Was salvation ever more than illusion? Was damnation ever more than inevitability? You search for the answer, but the mask does not answer, and the blade does not care. They carry only forward, and forward is the only direction left, and still, you know the truth. The galaxy remembers you not as you were, but as you appeared. Mask and blade, crimson light and fractured steel. You have become story, legend, warning, prophecy. Your name is not whispered with clarity, but with awe, with fear, with reverence. They do not speak of your heart or your doubts or your dreams. They speak of the mask that never flinched, the blade that never faltered. They speak of the Savior who damned, the damned who saved. And that is who you are, because that is all the galaxy can see. You walk onward now, the crimson glow stretching into the distance, painting the night like blood across an endless canvas. The mask tightens once more, the blade hums louder, and you understand that this is not the end of their story, nor yours, for they are not bound to time. They will outlast your breath, your flesh, your very memory. The mask will endure, the blade will ignite, and through them your shadow will stretch into centuries you will never live to see. And so you breathe, heavy beneath the weight, steady beneath the silence, and you accept what you have always known, that the mask and the blade are not symbols you chose. They are symbols that chose you. They have bound themselves to your soul, and in their binding they have made you eternal. Salvation and damnation were never separate. They were always the same flame, the same wound, the same destiny. And now, forever, they are you. You walk into the chamber, and it feels less like a room and more like a sanctum, carved out of silence. The walls rise in solemn curves, their stone smooth, with centuries of meditation, their air heavy with incense and restraint. Light filters through tall windows, muted and soft, as though even the sun must bow before the gravity of this place. The council sits in a circle, their forms draped in robes that hide more than they reveal, their eyes fixed not on you, but on something beyond you, as if they see not the person who has entered, but the weight of what you carry. You feel their gaze before it reaches you, like a current pressing against your skin, testing the strength of your spirit before a single word is spoken. You take your place at the center, and the silence deepens. The chamber itself seems to lean inward, listening, holding its breath. You have walked through battlefields drenched in fire and blood, through storms that tore at the fabric of your soul, yet it is here, in this stillness, that you feel the heaviest burden. The council does not roar, does not rage judges with quiet eyes, and quiet eyes pierce deeper than any blade. You wait for their voices, but already you know what they will say. You have heard it in whispers, in rumors, in the shifting tones of those who once called you ally. They speak at last, their words as measured as their breathing. They question not only your choices, but your essence. They ask if you have strayed from the path of the Jedi, if the mask you wear and the blade you wield have not already stained you beyond redemption. They do not accuse outright, but their doubt is woven into every syllable, soft as silk, sharp as glass. You feel their unease filling the chamber, pressing into your chest like the weight of unseen chains. You remember how you once believed this circle to be the center of wisdom, the compass of the galaxy, the guiding hand of light. But now, standing beneath their gaze, you see the fractures beneath their serenity. You see fear hidden behind restraint, indecision cloaked as patience, silence dressed as wisdom. You know what they refuse to say aloud? They fear you, not only for what you have done, but for what you have become. The battles you fought, the choices you made, the victories you claimed they are victories the council could not imagine. Victories that cost more than they were willing to pay. And so, rather than face what they failed to do, they turn their eyes upon you. You wish to speak, and when you do, your voice does not sound like your own. It carries with it the echo of war, the thunder of storms, the hum of the crimson blade. You tell them that their silence cost lives, that their refusal to act condemned worlds to fire. You tell them that waiting is not wisdom when children burn, that balance means nothing when injustice consumes entire planets. You tell them that the galaxy demanded action, And you answered, while they turned their gaze inward, content to let death spread until it touched even their temples. Your words echo through the chamber, each one striking like a blow against their composure. And still they sit in silence. Some lower their eyes, some tighten their robes, some shift with discomfort. A few dare to meet your gaze, but even in those eyes you see hesitation, the fear of speaking truth, the fear of standing against the weight of tradition. You realize then that this circle, for all its age and wisdom, is not immovable stone, but fragile glass. It shimmers with the illusion of strength, yet beneath the surface it trembles. And you wonder if it has always been so, if you simply could not see it before the mask was pressed to your face and the blade burned in your hand. You remember one voice breaking the silence, soft yet firm, asking you if you still believe in the code. The question is not innocent. It is a knife sheathed in courtesy, a test not of your words, but of your soul. Do you still believe in the code? You pause, and in that pause the chamber leans forward, waiting, hungry. You remember the code that once guided you, its verses etched into your earliest memories. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. But as the words rise within you, they feel brittle, hollow, like glass shattering against the storm. You answer, but your answer is not what they expect. You tell them that peace is not the absence of war, that knowledge is not the absence of ignorance, that serenity is not the absence of passion. You tell them that their code has become cage, that their silence has become complicity, that their balance has become blindness. And as you speak, you realize that you are not only speaking to them, you are speaking to yourself, to the fractures within you, to the truths you can no longer bury beneath robes and ritual. The chamber tightens with your words, as though the very walls have recoiled. Some of the council shift as if wounded. Others harden their expressions into stones. They do not speak, but their silence is louder than any accusation. You stand in the center, the mask pressing into your face, the blade pulsing at your side, and you know the distance between you has widened beyond repair. You are not one of them anymore. Perhaps you never truly were. And yet, even in this moment of fracture, you do not feel hatred. You feel sorrow. Sorrow for what has been lost. Sorrow for what they cannot see. Sorrow for the bond that has been severed, not by anger, but by silence. You understand now that betrayal does not always come as a dagger in the dark. Sometimes it comes as stillness, as eyes turned away, as voices that refuse to speak when the galaxy cries for them. The chamber remains quiet, but you feel the decision settling in the air, heavy and irreversible. Whether they cast you out or you walk away, the result will be the same. This circle is no longer your circle. This light is no longer your light. You step back, the sound of your footsteps swallowed by the silence. And as you turn toward the doorway, the glow of starlight falls across your mask. For a moment, you wonder if they see it too, the fracture in the steel, the fracture in your soul. But they do not speak, and you do not wait. You walk out of the chamber, and the doors close behind you with a sound that feels like finality. The council remains in their circle of silence, and you remain in the storm that awaits beyond. And as you step into that storm, you know this truth: the betrayal has already happened, and it was never theirs alone. It was yours too, for believing that truth could be found in silence, and that wisdom could be found in stillness. You know better now. You know the galaxy demands more. You carry the silence of the council with you, long after the doors have closed, and it clings to you heavier than any armor. Their gazes follow you, even in memory, a circle of eyes that spoke more in stillness than in words, a silence that became verdict before it was ever spoken aloud. You walk through the halls of the temple, where light falls in narrow streams, across polished stone, where statues of forgotten masters loom like guardians of traditions too brittle to bend. Once, this place had felt like sanctuary, like hearth. Now it feels like tomb, its walls carved not with wisdom but with warnings, its shadows thicker than the ones that haunted battlefields. You pause beneath the towering columns, and you remember the days when you sat as student, drinking in the council's teachings with unbroken faith. You recall the certainty you once felt that here, in this circle of stillness, truth was safeguarded against the chaos of the galaxy. Yet what you see now is not truth preserved, but truth avoided. Their refusal to move, their refusal to act, had left the galaxy bleeding, and in that refusal, you recognize a betrayal deeper than any blade could deliver. They betrayed not only you, not only the Republic, they betrayed the very people they swore to protect. You breathe in the incense of the temple, and even its fragrance feels changed. Sweet smoke turning sour in your lungs. Every step down these halls is a step across memory, and each memory fractures against the weight of what you now know. You remember sparring with peers in the practice chambers, laughter bright as sunlight, your body still unburdened by the taste of war. You remember kneeling in meditation, the hum of voices reciting the code rising in rhythm like a tide of certainty. You remember the pride in being chosen, the reverence of belonging. But now, those memories feel distant, like dreams recalled through cracked glass. You wonder if you ever truly belonged, or if you were always walking toward this fracture, toward this exile that had been waiting from the moment you first questioned silence. The mask at your side grows heavier, as though it, too, feels the weight of these halls. You have not placed it upon your face within the temple's walls, but even here it calls to you, demanding to be worn, demanding to erase the last fragile thread between who you were and who you have become. You resist, not because you fear it, but because you know that once you place it upon your face here, before these statues and halls, the separation will be complete. There will be no turning back, no returning to the fragile comfort of student or guardian. You will not be Jedi. You will not be theirs. And yet the crimson blade hums softly at your hip. A presence that cannot be hidden, a truth that cannot be denied. You sense the way others notice it as you pass, initiates pausing in their lessons. Knights lowering their voices, whispers rising like a tide. They see what the council could not say. They see what you already know, that you are no longer one of them, not in spirit, not in silence. The blade's glow has already marked you, and no oath can wash it away. You walk into the library, shelves rising like trees, scrolls and holocrons pulsing faintly with the light of accumulated centuries. Knowledge sleeps here, deep and vast, guarded by silence and order. You touch the spines of ancient texts, and you feel the pulse of voices that believed wisdom could be preserved by containment. Yet even as you brush against them, you know the truth. Wisdom is not preserved in stillness. Wisdom must breathe, must act, must burn in the living world. What use is knowledge that cannot save the dying? What use is truth if it remains bound in crystal and stone? You feel the contradiction, tearing through you, a wound deeper than the scars of war. You recall their calm expressions, their gentle tones, their certainty that inaction was the truest form of wisdom. You once believed them. You once believed that stillness was strength, that waiting was clarity. But now, after war and storm and shadow, you see the hollowness beneath their calm. Their stillness was not strength, it was fear. Their patience was not wisdom, it was refusal. Their balance was not harmony, it was blindness. And you can no longer share in that blindness. The betrayal cuts deeper because you once loved them. You once believed in them. You once built your identity upon the trust that they carried a truth greater than yourself. And now, in the glow of, you are not angry with them, not in the way fury rages in battle. You are sorrowful, sorrowful in the way of one who sees the truth too clearly. Sorrowful in the way of one who knows that love cannot repair what silence has already destroyed. And so you leave the library, the archives, the meditation halls, each step echoing like farewell. The temple seems to close behind you, not with force, but with inevitability, as though its walls themselves know you are no longer theirs to contain. The council will not speak again. The students will not approach again. The halls will not welcome you again. You have become other, and otherness is exile. As you step into the open air, the stars above Coruscant glitter with their cold brilliance, indifferent to your fracture, indifferent to the sorrow pressing into your chest. And you realize that betrayal is not always violent. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is a gaze turned away. Sometimes it is silence where there should have been voice. The council did not strike you down, but in their silence they abandoned you. And you, in your truth, abandoned them. You walk. And as the city's endless glow rises to meet you, you understand this. The chambers of the Jedi still exist, but for you, they have already become ruins.